Hi, I'm Mark. In this video, I'm going to show you how to test the ignition coil on a small engine. The ignition coil works with the flywheel on your small engine to produce the spark needed for the spark plug. Over time, your ignition coil can go bad. I'm going to show you how I test these myself to determine if the coil's bad or if it's something else. The ideal way to test your ignition coil would be with a multimeter. You'd set the meter to measure ohms and then take measurements between the various components on the coil and record the data. The problem is, for this type of test to be useful, you'd have to have something to measure the data against. Unfortunately, very few manufacturers post this kind of data for your use, so using a multimeter isn't really practical. So the way that I test for a bad ignition coil is with a spark tester. The spark tester is installed between the ignition coil and the spark plug. As the engine is turned over, it creates a high voltage charge which makes the spark at the spark plug. The tester creates that spark inside of a window that we can visually see to ensure that the coil is doing what it should be. To use this, the first thing I need to do is access the spark plug. Now remove the spark plug boot from the plug. And now I'll install the tester. I insert one side to the ignition coil and the other side attaches to the spark plug. With the tester attached to the engine, I'll pull the engine over with the starter rope and we should see a spark if the ignition coil is doing what it should. The spark tester can also be used to help you diagnose an ignition coil that has an intermittent problem. That is, it turns off while the engine is running. Again, with the coil attached, I would fire up the engine and let it run. I would then watch the tester very closely when I heard the engine shut off. If the coil was good and not the cause of the problem, as the engine coasted down, I would still see spark in the tester. But if the spark immediately goes away when the engine shuts off, that would tell us that the problem is likely the coil. This is a fairly simple spark tester. If we see a spark in the window, it's telling us that the coil is making power, but it doesn't tell us anything about the quality or the amount of power that it's making. That's where a tester like this one comes in. This tester has a variable gap. I can open the gap up, which will require more power to jump. Basically, we can stress the coil, making it produce more voltage than we would normally need to jump the gap in a spark plug. This tester is used the same way. I install one end of it to the ignition coil lead. The other end has a clip. I can install it right to the spark plug or to any grounded surface on the engine. Now I'll pull the engine over the same way and test. Now I can open up the gap and stress the coil. And if the coil can jump this larger gap, it'll tell us that the coil's in very good condition. So that's how a spark tester can be used to diagnose a bad ignition coil on your small engine.